Captain Kim Tae-ho stared at the navigation screen with growing concern. The numbers didn't look right. They were supposed to be heading to Proxima Centauri for humanity's first faster-than-light test flight. But something had gone very wrong with their calculations. Park Ji-won, he called to his chief engineer. Are you sure about these coordinates? Park wiped sweat from his forehead as he checked his instruments again. I triple-checked everything, Captain. The hyperspace drive should work perfectly. We just need to activate it and... The ship lurched violently. The lights flickered, and every alarm on the bridge started screaming at once. Through the view screen, space twisted and bent in ways that hurt to look at. Colors that had no names swirled around their ship like cosmic soup. What's happening? Shouted Communications Officer Lee So-min, gripping her console as the ship shook. We're entering hyperspace! Park yelled back. But something's wrong. The readings are all over the place. Dr. Choi Hyun-woo, the ship's scientist, watched his instruments with fascination rather than fear. This is incredible. We're moving through dimensions that shouldn't exist. The physics here are completely... His words were cut off as everything went white. When the light faded and the alarm stopped screaming, the crew of the New Soul found themselves in a place that definitely wasn't Proxima Centauri. They were floating inside what looked like a massive crystal palace. The walls were made of some kind of glowing purple stone, and the ceiling stretched up so high they couldn't see where it ended. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was that they weren't alone. Hundreds of alien beings filled the enormous chamber. Some looked like giant insects with too many legs. Others resembled walking plants with eyes on stalks. A few appeared to be made entirely of living metal. All of them were bowing down toward a massive throne at the far end of the room. On that throne sat something that could only be described as a nightmare given physical form. It was 12 feet tall, with skin like black leather, and 6 arms ending in claws. Its head was shaped like a skull, but with 3 glowing red eyes arranged in a triangle. When it spoke, its voice sounded like grinding stone. Who dares enter the presence of Vexthok, the terrible emperor of the dominion of 1,000 suns, without permission? The alien courtiers trembled and pressed themselves lower to the ground. Several of the smaller ones appeared to faint from fear. Captain Kim looked around at his crew. Security Chief Han Do-yeon had her hand on her weapon but seemed more curious than scared. Accountant Song Min-ji was already taking notes, probably calculating the cost of the palace's construction. Pilot Yoo Jae-sung was grinning like he was watching an exciting movie. Well, Kim said calmly, this is embarrassing. He stood up and activated the ship's external speakers. Your Imperial Magnificence, we're terribly sorry about this. We seem to have made a navigation error. GPS problems, you know how it is. We were trying to get to Proxima Centauri, but we ended up here instead. Mind if we ask for directions back? To the Milky Way? The Emperor's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. This was clearly not the response he was expecting. In his 1,000 years of conquering worlds, species either threw themselves on the ground, begging for mercy, or immediately started shooting. No one had ever apologized for a GPS error. You seek directions? The Emperor asked, his terrible voice now sounding confused rather than threatening. If it's not too much trouble, Lee So-min added politely. We don't want to disturb your meeting, court session. We're not really sure what we've interrupted. Dr. Choi was busy scanning the aliens with his instruments. Fascinating, he muttered. The biodiversity here is incredible. That species there looks like it evolved from some kind of crystalline structure, and those ones appear to be silicon-based rather than carbon-based. This is the discovery of the century. He looked up at the Emperor with genuine excitement. Your Magnificence, would it be possible to conduct some basic biological surveys? We'd love to learn more about the different species in your empire. This is humanity's first contact with alien life, and the scientific opportunities are silence. The Emperor roared, but there was less conviction in it than before. He was starting to realize that these strange new creatures weren't responding to his intimidation tactics at all. One of his advisors, a tall alien with purple skin and too many tentacles, whispered urgently in his ear, "My lord, perhaps these beings are from a species so primitive they don't understand the concept of fear?" Song Min-ji had been quietly observing the palace's architecture and the various alien species. As someone who dealt with government bureaucracy for a living, she recognized the signs of a well-organized administrative system. "Excuse me," she called out, "but do you happen to have any paperwork we need to fill out? For the unauthorized entry, I mean. We're happy to pay any fines or processing fees." The Emperor stared at her. In all his centuries of conquest, no one had ever volunteered to pay fines for invading his throne room. "You wish to pay fines?" he asked slowly. "Well, we did enter your space without permission," Song Min-ji replied reasonably. "There must be some kind of procedure for that. Do you have a customs office? Immigration forms? We're not trying to immigrate permanently, of course, just passing through," the tentacled advisor whispered to the Emperor again. "My lord, I believe they may be suffering from some form of mental deficiency. Perhaps they don't understand the situation they're in." But the Emperor was beginning to suspect something else. These creatures weren't acting afraid because they genuinely weren't afraid. They were treating his terrifying imperial court like a minor inconvenience, the sort of bureaucratic mix-up that happened every day. Yu Jae-sung raised his hand like a student in class. "Sorry to interrupt, but this place is amazing. The engineering required to build something this size must be incredible. How do you handle the structural support? And the lighting system is brilliant. Is that some kind of bioluminescent technology?" The Emperor looked at his court full of cowering aliens, then back at the humans who were chatting about his palace like tourists admiring architecture. "You are not afraid," he said, and it wasn't a question. Captain Kim shrugged. "Should we be? I mean, this is definitely unexpected, and we're sorry for barging in uninvited, but you seem like reasonable people." "Well, reasonable beings. Whatever. The point is, we're sure we can work this out diplomatically." For the first time in his 1,000-year reign, Emperor Vexathak the Terrible was completely at a loss for words. The humans waited patiently for his response, while around them an empire's worth of alien species tried to understand how anyone could be this calm in the presence of the galaxy's most feared ruler. It was going to be an interesting day. Emperor Vexathak had ruled for over 1,000 years, and in all that time he had never encountered beings quite like these humans. After the initial shock of their arrival, he decided to test them properly. Surely, once they understood the true power of his empire, they would react like every other species, with terror and submission. "Guards," he commanded, "escort these visitors to the Hall of Conquered Worlds. Let them see the fate of those who oppose the Dominion." The massive alien guards, each standing 8 feet tall and armed with energy weapons, surrounded the Hao human crew. Captain Kim Tae-ho nodded politely to them. "Thank you for the escort," he said. "We appreciate the guided tour." The Hall of Conquered Worlds was designed to inspire fear. The walls were covered with holographic displays showing planets being destroyed, cities burning, and defeated alien armies surrendering. Each display was labeled with the name of a conquered world and the date of its fall. Dr. Choi Hyun-woo walked along the walls, studying each display with scientific interest. "Remarkable," he said to one of the guards. "The variety of planetary environments you've encountered is incredible. This desert world here, did the silicon-based life forms put up much resistance? I imagine their physiology would make them quite different from carbon-based species in terms of military tactics." The guard, a lizard-like creature with scales, like armor, was completely confused. Prisoners were supposed to weep when they saw the Hall of Conquered Worlds, not ask academic questions. Song Min-ji had found a display showing tribute payments from various worlds. She was taking notes in her small notebook, occasionally making disapproving sounds. "Excuse me," she said to another guard, "but are these tribute amounts calculated as a percentage of planetary GDP or as fixed payments? Because if it's fixed, payments, you're not accounting for inflation or economic growth. You could be losing significant revenue over time." The guards stared at her. No prisoner had ever offered to help improve the Empire's tax collection system. Meanwhile, Lee So-min had discovered that the displays were interactive. She was scrolling through information about different conquered species, reading about their cultures and technologies with the same interest she might show while browsing a museum exhibit. "This is fascinating," she said to Dr. Choi. "Look at this species here. They communicate entirely through color changes in their skin, and this one has a collective consciousness. The linguistic challenges for first contact must have been enormous." Han Do-yeon was examining the room's security features. As a former military officer, she automatically assessed threats and defensive positions wherever she went. What she saw impressed her. "Good sight lines," she commented to the nearest guard. "Multiple exit points, overlapping fields of fire. Whoever designed the security for this room knew what they were doing. Very professional." The guard, who had been selected for his intimidating appearance rather than his conversational skills, could only grunt in response. Pilot Yu Jae-sung was most interested in the technical aspects of the displays. "How do you manage the data? Storage for all this information?" he asked. "The processing power required to run real-time holographic displays of this resolution must be enormous. Are you using quantum computing? Some kind of biological neural network?" By this time, the guards were exchanging confused looks. They had brought thousands of prisoners to this hall, and every single one had either fainted, begged for mercy, or tried to attack them in desperation. None had ever started a technical discussion about computer systems. Chancellor Grixtor, the Emperor's chief advisor, arrived to check on the humans' progress. He was a tall, thin alien with purple skin and multiple tentacle arms that allowed him to operate several computers at once. He had expected to find the humans cowering in terror. Instead, he found them chatting with the guards like old friends. "This is not the usual response," he admitted to himself. Grixtor decided to escalate the situation. He activated the room's holographic system to show the most terrifying display in the Imperial archives, the destruction of Kepler 442b, a planet that had resisted the Empire for 3 years before finally falling. The hologram showed cities being bombed from orbit, forests burning, and millions of refugees fleeing across a devastated landscape. The final scene showed the planet's leaders signing a surrender document while their world burned behind them. Dr. Choi watched the entire display with scholarly attention. When it ended, he turned to Grixtor. "The orbital bombardment strategy is very effective," he said, "but I noticed you targeted population centers first. Was that for psychological warfare, or were you trying to eliminate military command structures? Because from a strategic standpoint, hitting infrastructure first might give you better long-term control with less reconstruction costs afterward." Grixtor's tentacles writhed in confusion. You are analyzing our military tactics?" "Well, yes," Choi replied. "It's interesting to see how different species approach warfare. Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years, so we've developed quite a few different strategies. Your approach is very direct and effective, but there might be some refinements that could reduce costs and improve efficiency." Song Min-ji looked up from her notes. "Speaking of costs, do you have any data on post-conquest reconstruction expenses? Because I'm seeing what looks like a pattern where initial conquest costs are relatively low, but long-term occupation and rebuilding expenses are quite high. There might be some ways to optimize that." Chancellor Grixtor realized he was in completely uncharted territory. He had served the Empire for 200 years, had personally overseen the conquest of dozens of worlds, and had never encountered beings who treated imperial military strategy like a business school case study. "You are not horrified by what You have seen? He asked hesitantly. Captain Kim Tae-ho considered the question seriously. It's definitely not pleasant, he said. War never is, but it's not exactly shocking either. Humans have done similar things to each other throughout our history. The technology is more advanced here, but the basic concept is the same. Your species has experience with conquest? Grixtor asked. Oh yes, Lee So-min replied cheerfully. We've had empires, invasions, occupations, genocides, world wars, pretty much every type of large-scale violence you can imagine. We're actually quite good at it, unfortunately. Though we've been trying to get better about solving problems diplomatically in recent centuries. Grixtor made a mental note to research this Earth planet immediately. If these humans were telling the truth, their species might be far more dangerous than they appeared. Yu Jae-sung had wandered over to examine the room's projection equipment. You know, he said to one of the guards, if you adjusted the holographic emitter's frequency by about 12%, you could increase the image resolution significantly. Want me to show you? The guard looked around desperately for guidance. This was definitely not covered in the manual for handling prisoners. Han. Do-yeon had been quietly observing the guard's equipment and tactics. Your energy weapons are impressive, she told the squad leader. What's the effective range? And do they have stun settings, or are they lethal only? Because non-lethal options can be very useful for crowd control situations. The squad leader, a professional soldier who had served in dozens of campaigns, found himself explaining weapon specifications to a prisoner as if she were a fellow officer. Chancellor Grixtor realized he needed to report this situation to the Emperor immediately. These humans were not responding to intimidation, were not showing appropriate fear, and were asking questions that no conquered species should be intelligent enough to ask. Worse yet, some of their suggestions were actually quite good. As he hurried back to the throne room, he heard Dr. Choi asking one of the guards about the nutritional requirements of different alien species, Song Min-ji discussing tax policy with another guard, and Yu Jae-sung explaining improvements to the holographic display system. For the first time in his 200-year career, Chancellor Grixtor was beginning to suspect that the Empire might have encountered something it wasn't prepared to handle, a species that was genuinely helpful. Emperor Vexathok was running out of ways to intimidate the humans. The Hall of Conquered Worlds had failed completely. They had treated it like an educational museum tour. Now he decided to try a more direct approach, the Imperial Dungeons. Take them to the Chamber of Infinite Sorrows, he commanded his guards. Let them see what happens to those who displease the Empire. The Chamber of Infinite Sorrows was the Empire's most feared torture facility. The walls were lined with devices designed to cause maximum pain to dozens of different alien species. Some looked like medieval torture devices, others resembled high-tech medical equipment gone wrong. All of them were designed to break the will of even the strongest prisoners. Security Chief Han Do-yeon entered the chamber first and immediately began a professional assessment. She walked along the walls, examining each device with the eye of someone who had studied interrogation techniques. Interesting setup, she said to Zargoth, the Tormentor, the chamber's chief operator. Very comprehensive. You've got something, here for just about every type of physiology I can imagine. Zargoth was a massive alien who looked like a cross between a spider and a nightmare. His 8 arms each ended in different types of surgical instruments, and his voice sounded like metal grinding against bone. You should be screaming in terror, he said, confused by her calm reaction. Oh, this is definitely scary, Han Do-yeon agreed. Very well organized, too. But I have to ask, do you have proper safety protocols? Because some of these devices look like they could cause repetitive stress injuries if you use them for extended periods. Have you considered ergonomic improvements? Zargoth stared at her with all 6 of his eyes. In 300 years of professional torture, no one had ever asked him about workplace safety. Ergonomic improvements? He repeated slowly. Well, look at this device here, Han Do-yan said, pointing to a complicated machine with multiple moving parts. The operator position requires you to lean at an awkward angle for extended periods. That's going to cause back problems over time. If you adjusted the height by maybe 6 inches and added some padding here, it would be much more comfortable to use. Dr. Choi Hyun-woo was examining the devices from a scientific perspective. The variety of pain induction methods is remarkable, he told Zargoth. You've clearly done extensive research into the neurological systems of different species. This electromagnetic field generator here, does it target specific nerve clusters, or does it work more broadly on the entire nervous system? It targets the pain receptors directly, Zargoth answered, despite himself. Brilliant, Choi said admiringly. The precision required for that kind of neural targeting must be incredible. What kind of scanning equipment do you use to map the subject's nervous systems first? Meanwhile, Song Min-ji had found the chamber's administrative office. She was looking through filing cabinets and record books with professional interest. Your record-keeping is very thorough, she told Zargoth's assistant, a smaller alien who kept track of prisoner processing. But I notice you're still using paper forms for intake procedures. Have you considered switching to a digital system? It would save a lot of storage space and make searches much faster. The assistant, whose job consisted mainly of updating torture schedules, had never thought about office efficiency before. Captain Kim Tae-ho was talking with one of the dungeon guards about working conditions. This must be a tough job, he said sympathetically. Do you get hazard pay for working in an environment like this? What about health insurance? Some of these chemicals and energy fields could have long-term health effects. The guard, who had never considered that he might deserve workers' compensation, was starting to think about his career choices. Yu Jae-sung was fascinated by the power distribution systems that ran all the high-tech torture devices. The energy requirements for all this equipment must be enormous, he said to Zargoth. How do you handle load balancing? And what happens if you have a power surge? Do you have backup generators? Zargoth was completely out of his element. He had spent centuries perfecting the art of causing pain, but no one had ever asked him about electrical engineering. We have backup power, he said weakly. Good thinking, Yu Jae-sung replied. Because if the power went out during a procedure, you'd lose all your progress. Very inefficient. Lee So-min had struck up a conversation with another torturer about communication techniques. Do you find that different species respond better to different types of interrogation approaches? She asked. Because in human psychology, we've found that building rapport is often more effective than direct intimidation. The torturer, who had never considered interrogation as a communication challenge, found himself discussing the finer points of cross-species psychology. After 2 hours in the Chamber of Infinite Sorrows, the humans had managed to turn it into something resembling a professional development workshop. They had offered suggestions for workplace safety, administrative efficiency, technical improvements, and employee relations. Zargoth was having an identity crisis. You are supposed to be terrified, he said desperately to Han Do-yan. This chamber has broken the will of the strongest warriors in the galaxy. Why are you not afraid? Han Do-yan considered the question seriously. Well, it's definitely not pleasant, she said. But fear is just another emotion. You learn to manage it. Besides, you seem like a professional who takes pride in your work. I can respect that even if I don't like what you do. But I am a monster, Zargoth protested. I cause unspeakable pain to innocent beings. Yeah, that's not great, Han Do-yan agreed. But everyone's got to make a living, and honestly, I've seen worse things done by people who weren't nearly as organized about it. This was not helping Zargoth's identity crisis. Dr. Choi had been taking notes the entire time. From an anthropological standpoint, he said, this whole facility represents a fascinating example of institutional culture. You've developed standardized procedures, specialized roles, and a clear chain of command. It's actually quite sophisticated as organizations go. You are analyzing us like laboratory specimens, Zargoth accused. Well, yes, Choi replied cheerfully. That's what I do. I study different cultures and social structures. This is actually quite interesting from a sociological perspective. Song Minji looked up from the filing cabinets where she had been reorganizing the intake forms. You know, she said to Zargoth, if you implemented a few basic efficiency improvements, you could probably increase your processing capacity by 30% while reducing overhead costs. Would you like me to write up a proposal? Zargoth sat down heavily on the nearest chair, which happened to be designed for torturing a species with 3 legs. This is not how this is supposed to work, he muttered. Captain Kim patted him on what appeared to be his shoulder. Change is always difficult, he said kindly. But sometimes an outside perspective can help you see new possibilities. When Chancellor Grixtor arrived to check on the humans' progress, he found them conducting what appeared to be a management consulting session. The torture devices were still running, but now they were being used to demonstrate improved operational procedures. Zargoth, the tormentor, scourge of 100 worlds, was taking notes on workplace safety, while Han Do-yan explained proper ergonomic positioning. Grixtor decided he needed to have a very serious conversation with Emperor Vexthak about these humans. They weren't being broken by the Empire's traditional methods. Instead, they were accidentally improving the Empire's efficiency. This was either the best thing that had ever happened to the Dominion of 1,000 Suns or the most dangerous threat it had ever faced. Possibly both. Emperor Vexthak decided to try a different approach with the humans. Instead of intimidation, he would try to impress them with the glory and power of his empire. He invited them to a formal state dinner in the Grand Hall, where they would dine, alongside his most successful generals and governors. The Grand Hall was magnificent, with a ceiling that showed real-time images of stars and conquered worlds. The table stretched for 100 meters and could seat 500 beings from dozens of different species. Crystal chandeliers floated in the air without any visible support, and the walls were decorated with the captured battle standards of defeated armies. Captain Kim Tae-ho and his crew were seated near the Emperor's throne, a position usually reserved for the most honored guests. They wore their simple ship uniforms, which looked very plain compared to the elaborate military dress of the alien officers around them. "Welcome, humans," Emperor Vexthak announced. "Tonight you shall hear the greatest war stories in galactic history." The dinner began with General Cractus, a massive insect-like creature with razor-sharp claws, telling the story of his conquest of the Andorian system. He described how his forces had surrounded 3 planets, bombarded them for months, and forced their surrender through starvation. The Andorians thought they were safe behind their planetary shields, General Cractus clicked triumphantly. But we simply waited. No supplies could get through. After 6 months, they were eating their own dead. After 8 months, they surrendered unconditionally. The alien officers around the table made approving sounds. This was the kind of ruthless efficiency the Empire was known for. Captain Kim listened politely, then nodded. "Siege warfare," he said. "Very effective. We used similar tactics during the siege of Leningrad." "The what?" General Cractus asked. "World War II on our planet," Kim explained. "One of our cities was surrounded for almost 3 years. The attackers cut off all supplies. People ate pets, leather, wallpaper paste, anything they could find. About 1 million civilians died, but the city never surrendered. The table went very quiet." Your own species did this to itself?" General Cractus asked slowly. "Oh yes," Kim replied. "We've had 2 world wars, plus hundreds of smaller wars. We got very good at siege tactics, though we found that psychological warfare was often more effective than just cutting off food supplies." Governor Vexasiler, who ruled 12 star systems, decided to share his own story. I once crushed a rebellion by taking hostages from every family on 7 worlds, he boasted. Whenever rebels attacked our forces, I would execute 1,000 hostages. The rebellion ended in 3 months. Dr. Choi Hyun-woo looked interested. Collective punishment, he said. We tried that approach quite a bit during our colonial periods. Though we found that it sometimes backfired, it could make the population more angry instead of more compliant. Did you have any problems with increased resistance? Well, Governor, Vexasiler admitted, there were some issues with terrorist attacks afterward. Right, Choi nodded. That's the classic blowback effect. You might want to consider more targeted approaches. We found that removing specific leaders was often more effective than mass punishment. Song Min-ji had been listening to the conversation while doing calculations in her notebook. Excuse me, she said to Governor Vexasiler, but what was the economic impact of killing 1,000 workers every time there was an attack? Because that represents a significant loss of productive capacity over time. I never calculated that, the governor admitted. You should, Song Min-ji replied. Dead workers don't pay taxes, don't produce goods, and don't have children who can become future workers. Mass executions might give short-term compliance, but they're very expensive in the long run. Admiral Gorthak, commander of the Imperial fleet, tried to regain control of the conversation. Perhaps you would be impressed by our victory at the Battle of Seven Suns, he said. We destroyed an entire solar system to prevent it from falling into enemy hands. Lee So-min looked up from her meal. You destroyed a whole solar system? That's... wow. How did you manage that? And why was it necessary? We detonated the central star, Admiral Gorthak said proudly. Better to destroy it than let our enemies have it. Scorched earth tactics, Yu Jae-sung said admiringly. Very decisive. We used that approach quite a bit during various wars, though usually on a smaller scale, burning crops, destroying infrastructure, that sort of thing. A whole solar system is definitely thinking big. Han Do-yeon frowned. Seems wasteful, though. How many planets were in that system? What was the total population? 7 worlds, approximately 12 billion beings, Admiral Gorthak replied. And you killed all of them to deny resources to your enemies? Han Do-yeon asked. Of course. Han Do-yeon exchanged glances with Captain Kim. That's actually pretty extreme, even by our standards. Your standards? Admiral Gorthak asked. Well, Captain Kim said carefully, we've done some pretty terrible things to each other over the centuries. Wars, genocides, ethnic cleansing, nuclear weapons. But 12 billion people, that would be one of the larger mass killings in our history. The alien officers were staring at the humans now. What do you mean, larger? Emperor Vexthak asked slowly. Dr. Choi pulled out his electronic tablet and showed them some basic statistics. Well, let's see. World War II killed about 75 million people. The Mongol conquests killed maybe 40 million. Various genocides throughout history. It adds up to quite a lot, actually. He scrolled through the data. Oh, and that's not counting deaths from disease, famine, and displacement caused by wars. If you include those, the numbers get much higher. Your species did this to itself? Governor Vexasiler whispered. Repeatedly, Lee So-min confirmed. We're actually much better about it now than we used to be. The last few decades have been quite peaceful, relatively speaking. General Kraktus had gone very still. How many wars has your species fought, Captain? Kim thought about it. That's actually a hard question to answer. It depends on how you define war versus conflict versus police action. If you're talking about major wars involving multiple nations, maybe hundreds, thousands. We've been fighting each other for as long as we've had recorded history. And you survived? Admiral Gorthak asked in amazement. Well, obviously, Yu Jae-sung replied. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here having dinner. with you. Though there were a few times it was touch and go. The nuclear weapons period was particularly dangerous. Nuclear weapons? Emperor Vexthak asked. City-destroying bombs, Han Do-yan explained. We built tens of thousands of them. For a while there, we had enough nuclear weapons to destroy all life on our planet several times over. But you didn't use them? Well, we used them twice, Captain Kim admitted. But then we realized it was probably a bad idea to destroy our own planet, so we mostly just threatened each other with them for a few decades. The alien officers were completely silent now. Dr. Choi showed them some pictures on his tablet. Here's what one of our cities looked like after a nuclear attack. And here's what the same city looks like now. We rebuilt it completely. Emperor Vexthak stared at the images. The first showed complete devastation, with nothing left but rubble and shadows burned into stone. The second showed a thriving modern city. You rebuilt after this? He asked. Oh yes, Choi replied. Humans are very good at rebuilding. We've had lots of practice. Song Minji had been taking notes throughout dinner. Actually, she said, I've been thinking about your empire's approach to conquest, and I think you might be missing some opportunities. Based on human history, the most successful empires were usually the ones that offered something valuable to conquered peoples, not just punishment for resistance. Such as? Chancellor Grixtor asked. He had been listening from a nearby table and was fascinated despite himself. Trade opportunities, infrastructure development, protection from other enemies, access to new technologies, Song Minji replied. You get much better long-term compliance if people feel like they're benefiting from being part of your empire, not just being punished for opposing it. Emperor Vexthak realized that these humans had just casually revealed that their species was possibly the most dangerous in the galaxy. They had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times, rebuilt from the ashes, and learned from their mistakes. And now they were offering to help him run his empire more efficiently. For the first time. In 1,000 years, Vexthak the Terrible was genuinely impressed. 3 months had passed since the humans accidentally arrived in the Imperial throne room, and Emperor Vexthak was starting to realize that his empire was changing in ways he never expected. It started with Song Minji's efficiency improvements to the tax collection system. What began as simple suggestions for better record-keeping had somehow evolved into a complete overhaul of imperial finances. The bureaucracy that had taken centuries to develop was now running smoothly for the first time in galactic history. Your Magnificence, Chancellor Grixtor reported during their morning briefing. Tribute collection is up 37% across all sectors. Administrative costs are down 22%. And we've eliminated the backlog of processing, delays that had been building up for the past 50 years. Emperor Vexthak examined the reports with growing amazement. How did this happen? The human Song Minji, Grixtor explained. She reorganized our filing systems, implemented digital record-keeping, and created standardized forms for all imperial procedures. She also identified 17 different departments that were doing the same job and consolidated them into 4. In the Imperial Military Headquarters, Han Do-yan had been working as an unofficial consultant on logistics and strategy. Her suggestions, based on thousands of years of human military experience, had revolutionized how the Empire approached warfare. General Cractus, she said during a strategy meeting, I've been looking at your battle plans for the Rigel system, and I think you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. General Cractus, who had conquered 47 worlds, listened carefully. Over the past months, he had learned that the humans' military advice was remarkably effective. You're planning to attack all 5 planets simultaneously, Han Do-yan continued. But look at this supply chart. 3 of those planets depend entirely on the other 2 for food and manufactured goods. If you take the supply worlds first, the other 3 will surrender within weeks without any fighting. But that's not honorable combat, General Cractus protested. Honor doesn't feed your troops or pay for your equipment, Han Do-yan replied. Practically. Quick, efficient victories with minimal casualties are much better for everyone involved. Your soldiers go home alive. The conquered people don't get their cities destroyed, and the Empire saves money. General Cractus had to admit the logic was sound. When he implemented her strategy, the Rigel system fell in 2 weeks with almost no fighting. It was the most cost-effective conquest in Imperial history. Meanwhile, Dr. Choi Hyun-woo had been working with the Imperial Science Division. His extensive knowledge of different scientific fields, combined with his fresh perspective on galactic technology, was leading to breakthrough discoveries. The problem with your energy weapons, he explained to the chief weapons engineer, is that you're trying to do too much with them. You want them to be effective against every possible type of alien physiology, so you've made them incredibly complex and expensive. But we need weapons that work on all species, the engineer protested. Do you, though? Choi asked. Look at this data. 85% of your targets are humanoid species with similar basic biology. If you made simpler, cheaper weapons, optimized for that majority, and then specialized equipment for the unusual cases, you'd cut manufacturing costs by 60% while actually improving effectiveness. The weapons engineer tried Choi's approach and discovered that the new designs were not only cheaper to produce, but also more reliable in battle. Yu Jae-sung had found his calling working with the Imperial Infrastructure Department. His engineering background was helping to solve problems that had plagued the Empire for centuries. Your communication system is impressive, he told the chief engineer, but you're routing everything through the central hub on the capital world. That creates massive delays and a single point of failure. But we need central control, the chief engineer argued. You can have central control without central routing, Yu Jae-sung explained. Set up regional hubs with backup connections. Messages get delivered faster, the system is more reliable, and if one hub goes down, the others keep working. When they implemented his suggestions, communication delays across the Empire dropped from days to hours, and the system became much more stable. Lee So-min had been working with the diplomatic corps, helping to improve communications with newly conquered worlds. Her background in linguistics and cultural studies was proving invaluable. The problem, she explained to the chief diplomat, is that you're trying to translate your surrender demands literally. But language isn't just about words. It's about cultural context. When you tell the vegan species that they must bow before imperial might, you're accidentally using a phrase that means something very offensive in their language. What does it mean? The diplomat asked. Roughly translated, you're telling them to expose their reproductive organs to your military forces, Lee So-min replied. Which is why they keep responding with angry war cries instead of surrender offers. With better translation protocols and cultural sensitivity training, the diplomatic corps was achieving peaceful surrenders from species that had previously fought to the last soldier. The most dramatic change came from an unexpected source, Zargoth, the tormentor. After months of conversations with Han Do-yeon about workplace safety and professional ethics, he had completely rethought his approach to interrogation. Your Magnificence, he reported to Emperor Vexthak. The humans were correct about interrogation. Techniques, psychological pressure, and rapport building are much more effective than physical pain. You're not torturing prisoners anymore? The Emperor asked, confused. Oh no, I'm still extracting information very efficiently, Zargoth replied. But now I offer prisoners comfortable chairs, good food, and pleasant conversation. They tell me everything I want to know because they think I'm being nice to them, and this works better than torture ever did. Plus, the prisoners don't hate us afterward, so there's less resistance in the occupied territories. And my staff's job satisfaction has improved dramatically since we stopped dealing with all the screaming. Captain Kim Tae-ho had been observing all these changes from his position as an unofficial advisor to the Emperor. What he saw amazed him. Your empire is becoming incredibly efficient, he told Emperor Vexthak during one of their weekly meetings. Tax collection is smooth, military campaigns are cost-effective, communication is fast and reliable, and even your interrogation department is getting better results with lower overhead. Yes, the Emperor said slowly. But is it still an empire, Uma? Considered this. Well, you still rule 1,000 star systems. You still have the biggest military force in the galaxy. Your word is still law across hundreds of worlds. The only difference is that now everything actually works properly. Emperor Vexthax stared out at his capital city through the palace windows. The streets were cleaner than they had been in centuries. Construction projects were finishing on schedule and under budget. Crime was down because people had better jobs and more opportunities. My subjects seem happier, he observed. Happy subjects are more productive subjects, Song Minji said, entering the room with her daily efficiency reports. And productive subjects generate more tax revenue, require less military oversight, and cause fewer administrative problems. But I'm supposed to be a feared tyrant, the Emperor protested. You can be a feared tyrant with good management practices, Han Do-yan replied, joining the conversation. Fear and efficiency aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, an efficiently run empire is much more intimidating than a chaotic one. Dr. Choi looked up from his research tablet. From an anthropological perspective, what you've created here is quite remarkable. You have absolute authority, but you're using it to create systems that benefit everyone. It's like benevolent dictatorship, but with better bureaucracy. Emperor Vexthax realized that somehow, without meaning to, he had become the most effective ruler in galactic history. His empire was more powerful, more prosperous, and more stable than ever before. And it was all because of 5 humans who had gotten lost on their way to Proxima Centauri and treated his terrifying galactic empire like a workplace that needed better management. The Emperor wasn't sure if this was the best thing that had ever happened to him, or if he should be worried about what would happen when other species figured out that humans were this good at running things. 6 months after their accidental arrival, Captain Kim Tae-ho and his crew were summoned to the Imperial throne room for what Emperor Vexthax called a matter of critical importance. The crew had grown accustomed to these meetings, which usually involved the Emperor asking for their advice on some aspect of running his empire. But this time felt different. The throne room was packed with representatives from across the empire. Governors, generals, admirals, and bureaucrats from 1,000 worlds had gathered for what appeared to be the most important imperial assembly in centuries. Emperor Vexthax sat on his throne, but something about his posture was different. He seemed less intimidating and more businesslike. Humans, he began, his terrible voice now sounding merely authoritative rather than frightening. 6 months ago, you arrived in my empire by accident. In that time, you have transformed the dominion of 1,000 suns into something unprecedented in galactic history. The alien representatives murmured agreement. Many of them were holding tablets and documents, reports showing improved efficiency, reduced costs, and increased productivity across their territories. Tax collection is at an all-time high, the Emperor continued. Military operations are more successful and less expensive. Communication across the empire is faster and more reliable. Even our interrogation departments are achieving better. Results with lower overhead costs. Chancellor Grixtor stepped forward with a massive data display. The statistics are remarkable, he announced. Overall, imperial efficiency is up 43%. Citizen satisfaction has improved dramatically. Rebellion incidents are down 72%. And imperial revenue has increased by 58% while reducing administrative costs by 34%. Captain Kim looked around at his crew. They had been trying to be helpful, but he hadn't realized the full scope of what they had accomplished. The question before us today, Emperor Vexthax continued, is what to do about this situation. Song. Minji raised her hand politely. Your Magnificence, if I may ask, is there a problem with the improvements we've suggested? Because if some of the changes aren't working out, we'd be happy to help adjust them. The improvements are working perfectly, the Emperor replied. That is precisely the problem. He stood up from his throne, and Kim noticed that the throne itself had been modified. It now had proper back support and adjustable armrests. Ergonomic improvements that Yu Jae-sung had suggested after noticing the emperor's posture problems. For 1,000 years I have ruled through fear and intimidation, Vexthak said. I conquered worlds, destroyed civilizations, and built an empire based on terror. But now, he gestured to the assembled representatives. Now my subjects are volunteering suggestions for improvement. Conquered worlds are sending thank you messages for the infrastructure upgrades. My own generals are asking for management training courses. General Kraktus stepped forward. The human military advice has made our forces incredibly effective, he reported. But more importantly, it has made them precise. We can now achieve our objectives with minimal casualties and maximum efficiency. Conquered populations actually cooperate with us because they benefit from joining the Empire. My interrogation department, added Zargoth the Tormentor, has become the galaxy's leading center for psychological research and therapeutic techniques. We're getting better intelligence than ever before, and former prisoners keep sending us positive reviews. Han Do-yan looked puzzled. I'm sorry, but I'm not seeing the downside here. You have a more efficient empire, happier subjects, and better results across all metrics. Isn't that good? It is good, Emperor Vexthak admitted, but it raises a fundamental question about the nature of my empire. If my subjects are happy, prosperous, and willing participants in imperial society, am I still a conqueror? Or have I become something else entirely? Dr. Choi Hyun-woo considered this thoughtfully. From an organizational standpoint, you've evolved from a traditional authoritarian empire into something more like a highly efficient federal government with strong central authority. Your subjects have representation through the improved bureaucratic systems. Their needs are being met through better infrastructure, and they have opportunities for advancement through merit rather than fear. But I still have absolute power, the Emperor pointed out. Yes, but you're using that power to create systems that benefit everyone, Lee So-min replied. That's not really tyranny anymore. That's just very effective leadership. Emperor Vexthak walked down from his throne to stand directly in front of the human crew. This brings me to the matter at hand, he said. I have a proposition for you. The throne room fell completely silent. Join my empire, the Emperor said. Not as conquered subjects, not as prisoners, but as partners. Help me transform the dominion of 1,000 suns into something the galaxy has never seen before. An empire that actually works. Captain Kim exchanged glances with his crew. What exactly are you offering? Full citizenship in the empire. Vexthak replied, leadership positions in the imperial government, and most importantly, a chance to help shape the future of galactic civilization. Song Minji pulled out her notebook. What about the benefits package? Health insurance, retirement planning, vacation time? Chancellor Grixtor had prepared for this question. Full medical coverage across all imperial worlds, including experimental treatments for species-specific conditions. Retirement benefits calculated at 80% of final salary with cost of living adjustments. 4 weeks of paid vacation annually, plus imperial holidays. Stock options? Yu Jae-sung asked. Profit sharing in all imperial enterprises, the Emperor confirmed. Plus ownership stakes in any new territories or trade routes you help establish. Han Do-yan had a more practical concern. What about Earth? We can't just abandon our own species. We would welcome Earth into the Empire as well, Emperor Vexthak replied. Full membership, not conquest. Your planet would retain its government. And culture, we would simply provide technology, trade opportunities, and protection from other galactic powers. Dr. Choi was intrigued. You're offering to make Earth a member world rather than a conquered territory? Based on what I have learned about your species, the Emperor said, attempting to conquer Earth would be both unnecessary and unwise. Unnecessary because you are clearly willing to cooperate voluntarily, Unwise because any species capable of nearly destroying itself multiple times and then rebuilding stronger than before is not a species I want as an enemy. The crew spent several minutes discussing the offer among themselves. Finally, Captain Kim turned back to the Emperor. "We'll need to contact Earth first," he said. "Let our government know about the situation and get their input. But personally, I think this could be the beginning of something remarkable." "Agreed," Emperor Vexthak replied. "Take all the time you need." 6 months later, the first official diplomatic mission from Earth arrived at the imperial capital. They found a transformed empire, still vast and powerful, but now run with efficiency, that made the most advanced Earth governments look primitive by comparison. The negotiations took 3 weeks, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Earth joined the Empire as an equal member, retaining its sovereignty while gaining access to galactic technology and trade networks. The signing ceremony was held in the newly renamed Hall of Galactic Cooperation, where displays now showed infrastructure, projects, and cultural exchanges rather than conquest footage. Emperor Vexthak, who had quietly changed his title to Supreme Administrator of the Galactic Cooperative, signed the agreement with a pen that Song Minji had given him. It was more efficient than the ceremonial energy stylus he usually used. "Welcome to the Empire," he told the Earth delegation. "I hope you're ready to help us revolutionize galactic civilization." The Earth ambassador, a veteran diplomat who had handled some of the most complex negotiations in human history, looked around at the efficiently organized ceremony, the happy alien representatives, and the streamlined bureaucratic processes. "Your Excellency," she said to Captain Kim, "I have to ask, how exactly did you manage to accidentally conquer a galactic empire?" Kim thought about it. "We didn't conquer it," he replied. "We just helped it work better. Turns out that's all it really needed." Dr. Choi was already deep in conversation with imperial scientists about cultural exchange programs. Song Minji was discussing tax policy with the Imperial Treasury Department. Han Do-yeon was reviewing military cooperation agreements. Yu Jae-sung was explaining improvements to the Imperial Communication Network. Lee So-min was working on translation protocols for integrating Earth languages into Imperial systems. As the celebration continued around them, Captain Kim realized that they had accidentally created something unprecedented in galactic history. An empire that people actually wanted to join. And it all started with a navigation error and a polite request for directions. In his final log entry as captain of an Earth exploration vessel, Kim wrote, "Mission status, complete. Objective, establish first contact with alien civilization. Result, accidentally reformed galactic civilization through the application of basic administrative competence. Recommend this approach for future diplomatic missions. The galaxy would never be the same."